Arise, you workers, from your slumbers. Arise, you prisoners of once. For reason and revolt now thunders, and at last ends the age of cants. Away with all your superstitions, surviving masses, arise, arise. We change henceforth the old traditions, and spurn the dust to win the prize. So then, comrades, come rally, and the last fight let us face. The Internationale unites the human race. So then, comrades, come rally, and the last fight let us face. The Internationale unites the human race.
Greetings on this Mayday 2021 from the Peadar Socialist Republican Forum. 135 years after the events in the Haymarket in Chicago that caused us to begin celebrating the International Day of Labour, we again send greetings to the workers of the world and in particular to those here working in Ireland. Today, the Peadar Forum is going to carry broadcasts from the Tyrone People's Dáil, the Fermanagh People's Dáil, and solidarity greetings from one of our comrades and good friend in the United States of America, Matt Siegfried. First, though, let us hear from Niall Bowen speaking from the Tyrone People's Dáil.
Workers of the world and closer afield. Greetings from the Tyrone People's Dáil Assembly on this International Workers' Day. This past year has been one of the most difficult in living memory for the human race and, in particular, the working class. Never can we recall a situation which has affected so many people equally on a global scale. I wish to pay tribute on behalf of the Tyrone People's Dáil to all those workers who have lost their lives during this pandemic. Workers who risk their lives on the front lines of our health service and our retail sector, in our plants and our factories, putting their health at risk in order that they may keep food on the table, clothes on the backs of their children, and that they could ensure that our society could function in the best way possible. It would be wrong, however, to suggest that this pandemic has affected all workers equally. Despite repeated claims that we're all in this together, we have seen a deep chasm of inequality open up between those who were able to work from home in relative safety to those on such precarious work contracts that their only choice was to risk their health or go hungry. The level of under-resourcing and underfunding in our health service has been laid painfully bare during this pandemic. Today we praise those within our NHS for the gallant work they have done keeping us safe and fighting heroically against this disease. In dealing with the challenges of COVID, however, almost all other elements of our health service has been reduced, and as a result, other illnesses and health issues have been tragically not dealt with in time or efficiently enough. And we will surely be seeing the dire consequences of this for years to come, with late cancer diagnosis and mental health issues, to name but a few. It remains our view that the only viable solution for the health crisis on this island is to have a fully publicly funded all-island health service available to all equally regardless of their means. We the workers can, however, take positives from what has been a very difficult year for us all. No longer can it be said that the working class are replaceable or expendable, that the men and women of labour deserve only a basic wage and a reduction in workers' rates. Indeed, those who speak on behalf of the capitalist class have been forced to concede that all life, all trade and commerce is dependent on the labour and toil of the working class. This is indeed an opportunity for workers all over the globe to stake their claim and to demonstrate their true value and worth. Globally, we have seen a rise in working class consciousness with the rise of the BLM movement in the United States. Members of the Tyrone People's Dáil have been helping out across the community in the best way we can, from producing scrubs for our health staff to establishing food banks and advice centres for those who have been adversely affected by this pandemic through no fault of their own. The instability of our Stormont government and the brutal neoliberal economic practice which they helped to oversee here in the north meant that a crisis such as this was going to immediately adversely affect the lives of the working class in such a devastating manner. We continue as an Assembly going forward to be at the forefront of all the many issues that affect our daily lives. We pay tribute to Councillor Barry Monteith and Dan Kerr, who as ever are a guiding light to those within their local area left behind by our Executive's new approach. They continue to lead the campaign for more affordable public housing, as well as many charitable drives on behalf of our neighbours within the East Timorese community, whose families back home have been affected by the recent flooding there, as well as other migrant communities. We send messages of solidarity to our comrades in the Sperrins, manning the gallant GPO in defiance against the large multinational mining companies' intent, with the help of some local politicians, to mine and poison our country's beautiful countryside for generations to come. Unlike these politicians, we are inspired by the leadership of local Councillor Emmett McAleer, and we wish them all the best in their continuing struggle. They are a wonderful example to all communities preparing to fight for what is right against the odds. And so, comrades, in conclusion to this Mayday address, let us go forward with a sense of optimism for the future. Let us continue to assemble, to unite, and to create a better and fairer society out of the heartache that has been this past year. We have nothing to lose but our chains. Let us no longer mourn but organise. Thank you.
Well done, Niall. That was very interesting and an excellent contribution. But something else that Niall doesn't know is that after he had recorded that, himself and his production engineer were sitting discussing Mayday and its ramifications. They accidentally left the recording device on, and without their permission, we are going to now broadcast what was an incredibly interesting conversation between two young, enlightened and articulate workers.
Well, how you doing, Kiva? How you keeping today?
Not too bad, Niall, and yourself?
Keeping alright. Happy International Workers' Day to you.
And you too?
It's a strange one, isn't it? It's the strangest year that I can remember, and a difficult year at that for the workers, on this island and all over the world. It's been a strange one, and one that the workers have found it very difficult to cope with, hasn't it?
It's been very difficult for a lot of workers, and I suppose when you look at the news this morning, something very relevant is the Gardaí breaking up the peaceful strike, the Debenhams workers.
Unbelievable. I mean, this sort of broke a couple of nights ago. We've been seeing the brilliant work that the workers have been doing on Henry Street in Dublin, the Debenhams workers. And I suppose this is a symbolic strike, from our point of view. There's a lot of symbolism here. Debenhams, for whatever reason, has went into administration with the loss of all these jobs. And they have completely reneged on an agreement that they had with their staff. They've basically, whatever agreement they have, they've been able to tear it up and walk away from it. And I suppose from all workers' point of view, it goes to the heart of what is our work contracts. Are they worth the paper that they're written on? If a company can go into administration and completely walk away from all agreements that they have put in place, with the help of the scabs from the Gardaí who have went in and broke up a peaceful demonstration. A peaceful demonstration and a completely legitimate demonstration as well, that these workers are standing not only for their own rights but for rights across the working class. And as I say, this is a symbolic gesture, and what the Gardaí are doing, siding with the big Debenhams company and against the workers, is really disgusting to see, and we send our solidarity and our messages of support to them, and we'll help them out the best way we can. It's so infuriating to see how badly the workers have been treated in this case, particularly in the time of a pandemic as well, with a lot of government backing from the south as well. It's really devastating to see, So with that there in mind, and with that so relevant in the news at the minute as well, how have you been coping with the past 12 months?
Well,
you're teaching, aren't you?
I am. I'm teaching in Monaghan at the minute, and for the majority of last year we were online learning. Now, online learning was in the school I'm in a relatively well-to-do area. Is children had access to laptops, iPads, etc. However, I know friends of mine and other workers in schools in areas where children didn't have the access to electronic devices, didn't have access to broadband, to Wi-Fi. It was extremely tough for the children and for the parents. The children were children fell behind because they weren't able to access these devices. That will have an impact on them children in years to come.
I'd say so, yeah, no doubt about that, yeah.
When in reality, if them children were being looked after correctly, they would have access to their devices, to the internet, and would allow them, every child in the school to be equal, which every child should be equal, and should be afforded that opportunity to progress their education regardless of whether they're at home or in school. Again, you look at the children who, particularly in the north, with free school meals, were not able to access food. Them children whose only warm feed in the day is their school dinner. Children were, and I'm sure you've seen it yourself now, the images of the children outside the GPO and the images of the children in Belfast City and all over the 32 counties eating their dinner on the street, on the footpath. And at least when them children's in school, they were getting a hot meal. Yeah. And I suppose we owe a debt of gratitude as well to the likes of the workers in the People's Kitchen in Belfast and all over the Kyle Food Bank. Yeah. People who are going out of their way to help to ensure that these people get fed and to ensure that they get a warm meal in the day. Well,
it just goes to show in times of crisis, the workers will stand up and support each other. And we can be sure that our state government won't. What this pandemic has shown us, I suppose, is that it has opened up for everyone to see the deep chasm of inequality that exists within our society, and it hasn't affected everyone equally, despite these claims that we're all in this together and all. As you've laid bare there, the children going to the school, maybe their only warm meal of the day. I know for me personally, it's been a steep learning curve to try and get used to the teaching from home. And as far as I'm concerned, 100% pay raise for teachers isn't enough. From what I've experienced over the past 12 months, I think they are a great asset to us in teaching our children, and it will remain to be seen, for years to come, what effect this will have, but it can only have a devastating effect on the working class in terms of their prospects for education and achievement. And I'm minded to think back to when we were standing in South Tyrone Hospital on the picket lines for our frontline health staff.
December 2019.
Wasn't it 2019?
It was just
yeah.
shortly before
Just
the
before
lockdown.
before the pandemic.
Only a couple of months.
And when we think about what our health staff were asking for, you know, it was a basic living wage, you know, a basic living pay raise to bring them up to standard, pay parity with their counterparts. And I suppose, you know, I don't know, people can analyse the outcome of that. For me personally, I thought it was a defeat for the workers. When the majority of the health unions had agreed to the 1% pay raise, I seen it as a defeat. I seen it as we were not treating our frontline health staff with the respect that they deserved. And you only have to look over the past 12 months, you know, what they've done. They've risked their lives and their health and the lives of their families. And this isn't being dramatic, this is the facts. They have went into these hospitals, they went into these ICU units, knowing that they were at risk of exposure.
They were also going in without the adequate personal protection.
Exactly, going in. I remember at the start of the pandemic in the South Tyrone hospital, do you remember the nurses were asking? They didn't
have scrubs,
they didn't even
masks.
have the proper scrubs, the masks. They were asking or putting posts on Facebook and Twitter asking if anybody had any PPE that they could donate, and they were being reprimanded by some staff within the hospital for doing so. You know, it's just infuriating when you think of the lives that they have saved and such disregard that some have shown them in terms of respect within their own workplace. So going forward, hopefully, you know, once we come out of this pandemic, there will be a renewed emphasis on giving the proper pay to our frontline health staff and to other workers, you know, who during this pandemic have kept the wheels running, have kept the wheels moving.
They really have, and it's far from over, because as a result of the pandemic, the work that now will have to be done as regards waiting lists and operations and illnesses such as cancer, late diagnosis of cancer, things like that. Our nurses, doctors, frontline workers their next job is only beginning now, and it's only right that they are given the pay rise that they truly deserve for the work that they have done.
Yeah, when you consider the pressure that they were under before the pandemic in terms of waiting lists, you know, I know here in the north the waiting lists were horrendous before this pandemic, and now that everything's grinded really to a halt in order to deal with this, it's a seismic task, an unbelievable task ahead of them to come out of this pandemic and to get back to some kind of normality. And I note that the private health sector have done fairly well out of the pandemic as well, which goes to show that the resources are there, the buildings are there. This is something that can be solved with the adequate resourcing and funding, but there just isn't the will, both from the British state and from Stormont, to deal with this problem. So, as I say, let's look at the positives coming out of this. There has to be a renewed emphasis on these issues, and hopefully we'll see that going forward. More locally as well, you know, we can see our local Loch Ness fisheries. They've been caught in officially it's not, but I'm sure it is, a political entanglement between the British state and the EU government. Our Loch Ness fisheries have seen a delay in the relief fund, the COVID-19 relief fund from the European Union. I'm sure there's some politicking going on behind the scenes in regards to that. They didn't think much of our fishermen before the pandemic, so it comes as no surprise. But on top of all that, then they're facing the prospect of their livelihoods being literally drilled out from underneath their feet by a petroleum licence which has been given the go-ahead from Stormont. So they have their problems ahead of them as well, haven't they?
They have indeed, and I suppose on this Mayday we look to inspiration from the Greencastle People's Office, and all we can do is take inspiration from them and work with them to try our best to prevent this petroleum drilling in Lough Neagh. Not only will it destroy the lives of so many workers on Lough Neagh and its surrounding area, but destroy the country for generations to come. I know up in Greencastle it's known that the dust that will be formed from the drilling will cause DNA changes. It will cause cancer in children that aren't even born yet, will be born with potential deformities from this horrendous drilling. So we if we can do something similar to Greencastle, and we can look to them and take advice from them and stop this petroleum drilling in Lough Neagh.
What an inspiration they are up in Greencastle. Just regular Joes, local people that have formed such a thorn in the side of these multinational mining companies, mining gold out of the ground. Like who, what's gold for? I know. It seems like such a silly argument, but what are you drilling gold for? Leave it in the ground. It's not doing any harm. It's sat there for many, many years. Let it sit there. And you're running the risk of poisoning the countryside. It seems such a silly argument. And as you say, they can be the inspiration for action taken in terms of Lough Neagh. Drilling petroleum in Lough Neagh when the whole world is moving towards renewable sources of energy, and we're drilling the largest source of fresh water in these islands to get petroleum out. It seems like such a silly argument. It seems like a no-brainer, but yet our government in Stormont and in Britain are intent on doing this and upsetting the very delicate ecosystem which exists within Lough Neagh as it is, for the sake of a bit of petroleum. And these private companies are going to come in, they're going to drill down, they're going to extract what they want, and they're going to walk away and not have to deal with the consequences. It will be us, our children and our children's children that will have to be cleaning this up for generations to come. So with the inspiration from Greencastle and the GPO, we will go ahead and fight this every step of the way.
We will, and it's actually quite ironic. I was teaching my class only a short while ago about Earth Day 2021.
That's right, yeah.
And when we are teaching children to recycle their plastic bottles and to use paper bags, they're looking at these billion-pound companies drilling in their local loch, destroying the country.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. So let's keep organising, let's keep uniting.
Indeed.
And I'll see you back here in 12 months, and we can gloat about all the successes that we're going to have
of course
in the coming year. Solidarity to workers all over the world.
Yes.
Happy Workers' Day to everyone, and good luck to you all.
Slán live.
Wonderful, wonderful. Tell me, bet you're impressed with that. Now after that we're going to hear from the Fermanagh People's Dáil as Barry Murray sends greetings to the workers of Ireland and beyond on this Mayday.
Thanks, Tommy. Mayday is a celebration and commemoration of the efforts of workers locally and around the world. We know that without workers there would be no businesses. Imagine a factory that needed workers but had no workers. Imagine the transport company with no drivers, or the hospital with no nurses, doctors or cleaners, or your favourite shop with no staff. It's clear too that not much business would be transacted. And in turn, the bosses and the investors and the shareholders would not make their vast profits either. So workers are vital to ensure that businesses happen and profits are made. But workers are neither earn or receive the respect they deserve, or are they properly or financially rewarded for their labours. In fact, they are mostly treated as second-class citizens and even third-class citizens in some places. When profits begin to go down, no matter what the reason is, the first cuts made are the workers. He or she who try their best go down the road like all the rest. Workers are also subjected to the trickle-down system of payments. They are paid a tiny percentage of what they actually earn for their bosses. So in 2 or 3 days, even less, a worker will have produced enough to cover his or her wages. The rest of the week, their production is profit. Not for the worker, but the business and the bosses. Effectively, all workers are wage slaves. The life of the worker is largely a life of stress. They are time managed. They are governed by increasingly complex rules of work. The HR department and companies are their overlords and governors. Holidays are cut to the bone. Employment contracts would test the skills of any top barrister. Workers are imprisoned by company rules and regulations. And in the digital age, even the workers' activities on social media outside of work can see an employee brought before a HR kangaroo court. It has actually happened here in this Fermanagh area recently. Several times actually. Nowadays, it's not even enough for one person in a family to be able to cover the expenses. They just can't do it. Increasingly, it takes 2 people to generate enough income to just cover the basic needs of living. Wealthy people, on the other hand, can easily survive on one wage income, and therefore have more time to spend with their families. And as workers and the working classes who are forced to leave their native countries to find work, to feed their families, just to live, and employers will use the cheaper migrant labour against other workers to drive down wages, and in turn this drives up their profits. It's a statistical fact that the stress of work and struggling to survive seriously reduces the life expectancy of the average worker in the working classes. All of this would point to one thing. Well, several things actually. Workers are exploited. So workers need to become organised into strong and politicised workers' unions. There is a growing inequality between the standard of living of workers and that of the wealthy and elite classes. There is a serious need for the pitch to be levelled, and workers must take the lead in this political endeavour. The workplace struggles must become firmly entwined in the politics of life. They are not separate entities. The only way that an end to inequality and exploitation can happen is for workers to begin to get a full and equal share of the wealth they create. Now, you often hear the slogan, victory to the workers. Well, I would say political victory to the workers. And the established workers' unions of today in all of Ireland need to be part of this and make it a standard part of their work. In fact, an integral part of the work. As James Connolly famously said, the Irish people will only be free when they own everything from the plough to the stars. Gur míle maith agat.
For the final contribution to this celebration of Mayday 2021, we have greetings here and an interview with a good friend and comrade from the United States, Matt Siegfried. Matt is being interviewed here by Patricia Campbell of the Independent Workers' Union.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me, Patricia, and solidarity to all the comrades in Ireland from the United States.
Thank you. We really want to talk about what's happening in the US now, and of course, the Black Lives Matter campaign is very, very prominent, and the trial of Chauvin in Minneapolis, really, the whole world watched it.
Yes.
And we saw it really from the mainstream media and perhaps social media. Mm-hmm. But I'd really like to hear what you have to say, your analysis on that and what's really happening on the ground.
Well, I think that, the fact that he was convicted, that only happened because of a mass movement that challenged police in nearly every state and city across the United States last summer. It only happened because the people of Minneapolis overran the 3rd precinct of the police stations. I think we need to be very clear what brought about this conviction was a mass movement that challenged the police on a very fundamental level. And so if that's what it took to get just one officer convicted for what was a murder live on film, you can imagine what it will take for us to reform this system.
Yes.
It's not reformable, in other words, right? It's just not reformable. And I think that's become clear even through the trial. The trial has made clear that the police are not reformable. The whole way that they presented themselves in this trial, everything like that, we can say justice was done in a particular case, but justice would be George Floyd still alive, and justice would be all of the people killed since George Floyd's death still alive. So we have so far to go. Just in the trial itself, I think the 3 weeks of the trial, during those 3 weeks, police in the United States killed over 60 people, half of them black and brown, just in the time of the trial was going on. So we are knee deep in this, and we're not to justice yet.
Well, when you say, Matt, that we have so far to go, do you of course the trial's over now and everything seemed to be quiet again.
Yeah.
But what do you see the Black Lives Matter movement staying active on the ground like they have been for the last year?
Absolutely. Even last night in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, there were protests. There have been protests all around the country. When Dante Wright was killed in Minneapolis during the Chauvin trial, people rose up then. I think that the police have lost their legitimacy among the Black population, if they ever had it. But the legitimacy of the system is gone, and for the majority of Black people, and for a large group of younger white people and other people of color, the legitimacy of the police is gone, and it's going to be generations before they can regain their legitimacy, if they can ever regain it. So yes, absolutely, there will continue to be Black Lives Matter protests, just as there have been now for 200 years in this country. The fight against slavery was a Black Lives Matter protest.
Absolutely, Matt. Well, just when I watched some of the protests, and especially in Detroit, I watched some of the protests, and there seems to be quite a number of nationalities. You know, it's just not black people marching. And I'm just wondering, is it a class conscious movement?
I think that there's part of it is an extremely class conscious movement. Like any movement, it's all over the place, right? So like any movement, it's contradictory, and there's elements that are very progressive, and there's elements that are somewhat reactionary, just like any movement. One of the things that you can tell it's a real movement is that it's gone so far beyond the initial populations that were affected, right? And everybody feels affected by it in some way or another. So I think that what you're seeing is also a generational shift with younger people who have grown up since 2001. You know, they're now 20 years old and have known nothing but a police state in this country. Even for white folks, I think that there's a generational divide too, and it goes to beyond just the legitimacy of the police. And I think that it even goes into the legitimacy of this state. What is the basis of the United States? What is the basis of the police in the United States? In some ways, people are challenging the United States the way that people challenged the state of Northern Ireland, right? The state is not legitimate. Its police force is not legitimate. And I think that we're seeing that. And in some ways, the United States is going to be faced with a situation where there are parts of the population, both on the right and the left, who are insurrectionary, who are revolutionary, who have totally abandoned faith in the state. And so we're going to be faced with a serious crisis of legitimacy of the state, both on the right and both on the left in the coming period. And I don't know where that leads. But I think we're beyond just a protest against police now. And the whole notion of what is the United States, who does it belong to, what is the future of it, is now in play in ways that it just hasn't been for a couple of generations.
Well, that's very interesting, Matt. And unfortunately, we're running out of time. But as you say, it's beyond just the police issue. It's about much more.
Yes.
How's the labour movement at the moment? Is Black Lives Matter activists involved in the labour movement?
The labor movement is all over the place. And one of the most telling things was during the Chauvin trial, the National Guard were mobilized in Minnesota. And I'm sure Irish comrades don't know the particular history of Minnesota, but Minnesota brought us the Teamsters Union, the Meat Packers unions, and it was a very important place in the 30s for the creation of the unions. And those union struggles were put down by the National Guard. All of those union leaders were arrested by the National Guard. So the labor movement should know its history about the National Guard in Minnesota, but it was very split. And the National Guard set themselves up in the AFL-CIO labor headquarters in Minneapolis. And some labor militants went down there and tried to get them out of the labor headquarters and saying they had no place in the labor headquarters. And they were able to remove them from the labor headquarters. These rank and file and labor union activists were able to remove the National Guard from the union headquarters. But this caused a civil war within the labor movement, with the white unions, the building trades, and the Teamsters being very supportive of the National Guard and so-called law and order. And then parts of the unions with more Black and more young people being very supportive of the struggle in the streets. So I suspect we will see more and more of that. And unless the union movement really straightens themselves out and fully decides that they are on the side of the people and not the police, the union movement's in trouble with this next generation if they don't figure that out.
Well, thank you, Matt. You have ended on a high note for Workers' Day. Thank you very much.
You are very welcome, and happy May Day to all the comrades in Ireland. We have been not, we shall be all.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Bye-bye, Matt.
Thank you.
That was Patricia Campbell and Matt Siegfried bringing this celebration of May Day 2021 to an end from us on the Peadar O'Donnell Socialist Republican Forum. Before I go, I'd like to thank all our contributors who have taken part in this programme today. Finally, before we go, just like to remind you that the worker struggle continues and send our best regards to the national technicians working with and for the ASB here in the Republic of Ireland who are on strike demanding that privatisation be stopped. So from your presenter here, Tommy McKierney, best wishes today for May Day. As we sit back and enjoy Paul McAdam, that wonderful singer, play us out with the Internationale.
Deluded by reaction, on tyrants only we'll wage war. The soldiers too will take strike action, we'll break the ranks and fight no more. And the cannibals keep trying to sacrifice us to their pride. That soon we'll see the bullets flying, we'll shoot the generals in our own side. So then, comrades, come rally, and the last fight let us face. The Internationale unites the human race. So then, comrades, come rally, and the last fight let us face. The Internationale unites the human race. No saviour from above delivers, no faith have we in Prince of Peadar. Our own right arm the chains must shiver, chains of hatred, greed and fear. And ere the thieves will out their booty and give to all a happier lot, each at the forge must do the duty and will strike while the iron's hot. So then, comrades, come rally, and the last fight let us face. The Internationale unites the human race. So then, comrades, come rally, and the last fight let us face. The Internationale unites the human